right. So I am the District 5180 Peace Chair, and currently we have about 20 members on the Peace Committee, which is really wonderful. February is a Peace and Conflict Resolution Prevention Month on the Rotary calendar. And I'm going to tell a story, and some of you have heard this story before, but I think that it's particularly appropriate. In 2007, I went to Istanbul with Bob Muchler and Abe Abawali to the Rotary International Peace Forum. And the focus of that peace forum was how Rotary can facilitate peace in the Middle East. And we're listening to all these speakers. And during the first break, I introduced myself to the person who was sitting next to me. He was an attorney from Haifa in Israel. And most of the speakers up to that point had been from different Arab countries, prime ministers, former prime ministers, that sort of thing. And I looked over at him and I said, you know, the situation that you have in Israel with Palestinians, it's a lot like a family law problem. And he said, but we're not married to them. And I said, but you do have a baby together. And that's exactly what we have here. We have a baby together. And that is why we are doing this event today. Before we get going, I wanted to acknowledge some Rotary dignitaries. I know that DG Brent Hasty is with us, and he's been very supportive of this event. And RI Director Jarita Solari is with us. And I'm hoping that Vicki Pullitz comes in. There's Jarita. I'm hoping that Vicki Pullitz comes because she is actually registered too. But if she's not, we're recording this, and so she'll be able to see it at a later time. I want to thank all of the members of the Peace Committee, but I really want to especially thank DGE Desiree Wilson for getting us in touch with Braver Angels to begin with, Ann Browning, who's a member of the Fair Oaks Rotary Club, who's our moderator today. Joanne Hilton, a member of the Lincoln Rotary Club, who is our technical support person, and Kathy Clemens, just because of the Rotary Club of Roseville, who is just enthusiastically supporting this. And
Tom Knox has arrived, just to tell you.
Sorry. There he is. Okay. That was perfect timing. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Ann.
Thank you very much. This is something. I'm Ann Browning. I'm past president of the Fair Oaks, the Rotary Club of Fair Oaks, and am so honored to be able to facilitate this. I have been nudging and pushing my club to try to do something like this, and it's so wonderful to see it at a district level so that all of the clubs can begin to participate in this. I will talk more about what Braver Angels is towards the end. If anybody has any questions after this event, please contact me, and you can always look online at braverangels.org. What I've done with all of the panelists, thank you so much for showing up. And 84 people, that is really wonderful. So we have participants, panelists, and then we also have observers. I'm just gonna go through again. If you're an observer, I please need you to always keep yourself muted, always keep yourself with no video, because it can be extremely distracting. And for the panelists, unless you're speaking, if you would also kind of keep yourself muted, it just makes for a better flow with this Zoom. If we were in a regular room, then it would be normal. So as the moderator, all of you panelists, I'm so happy that you're here. I'm going to ask your permission, just by a show of hands, that as we go into the actual running of this and participating in it, that as moderator or facilitator, that I have your permission to interrupt you and say, okay, let's let somebody else have a turn, or, oh, that isn't really the question that we are dwelling on. If you could answer the specific question, but I need your permission to do that. So just raise your hand. Okay, great. So that's part of what my job is. The real goal of this is to listen. So definitely, if you're in the fishbowl, if you're in the middle and you're talking to each other, that is very profound to begin to find out what other people think. But if you are on the outside of the fishbowl, your job is to listen carefully. Listen for things that might you might have in common, or think of things that or listen for things that you weren't aware of in the past. We will be doing this pretty much one specific action at a time. So if you are listening, and if you were in a regular room, when we do this in a real room, not a Zoom room, when you're muted and your video is off, it's easy to roll your eyes or get up and bang around or to say, what a stupid comment. But if you were in a real room, you wouldn't do that. So I'm asking that as you're listening, if you would listen as if you were in a real room, because what that does is it just opens up your mind to what you might be listening to.
And I'm going to just continue and say we have now 95 people.
Wow.
So if you are not a panelist, you please turn your video off.
Yeah.
And you'll be muted. Thank you.
So here is how the fishbowl is actually going to work. Lynette was wonderful when she sent out directions ahead of time. If you've got any questions as I go through this, I'm going to have time for questions before we go in. What we will do, and I'm just going to do like think of a number between 1 and 5 type of a thing, but we are going to take first the reds or the blues. They will be in a fishbowl, literally, where everybody is watching and listening. We will have the questions that we had sent out ahead of time, and we'll have one question, and we'll have about 10 minutes in the group to talk about that one particular question, with everybody kind of getting a chance to talk. You don't have to raise your hand or anything like that. And if you feel led to talk, please do that. My job is to make sure everybody gets a chance to voice their thoughts. At the end of about 10 minutes, at the end of about 10 minutes or so, I'll then say, okay, we're going to shift to the next question that the fishbowl does. You'll discuss that for a little bit, and then I'll say, okay, thank you so much. And now you, red people or blue, whoever starts, will be on the outside. You'll mute yourself, you'll turn off your camera, and then we'll have the other color in the middle, and they will have the exact same question that you had. They'll go through their questions, and then at the end, we'll come back together again, much like we are here, and then we'll just talk about what you heard. If there was any surprises, what might be next for you, what this might spur you on to do, if anything. Does anybody have any questions before we start? Okay, so our goal really is to learn how the other side sees a particular issue. Very often as people are talking about their issue, we don't listen. I mean, I know I don't until I started doing this type of work. And it's easy to begin to put up what you want, your rebuttal. So in this particular format, it's very easy to begin to listen because we've designed it that way. Okay, great. And Lynette, did you send out the question to everybody ahead of time?
Yes.
You want to reiterate the question to everyone?
I don't have them here.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, what the question is, it's pretty basic. What do you believe? What do you believe is the benefit of having your side? Say it's a conservative side. Your conservative side, what is the benefit of that to the country? Then we'll talk about that for a little bit. And then we'll say, and what are some of your concerns about that particular side? Not so much generally as if you're a conservative, the whole conservative idea, but maybe in the way that it's governed or orchestrated or put into law. So, and believe me, I will be here to prompt you. I'll be here to answer any questions. So it'll be very good. Okay, Carol, Caroline Lee, you're a blue, and Neil Shepherd, you're a red. So Carol, why don't you think of a number between 1 and 5, and then Neil, you tell me your number between 1 and 5. I just wrote it down, so. You can unmute, Carol, or put your fingers up or something.
Okay, I'm muted.
Okay, good. And
Do you want
what
the number?
number would you say?
7.
Between 1 and 5.
Oh. Already I can't follow. Okay, let me do 3.
Okay, 3. And
Is-
how about you,
okay.
Neil? What's your number? You're muted. I just need you to unmute.
All right, who did you say?
Neil,
It says William
Oh,
Shepherd, but it's really,
yeah.
I call him Neil. So
he calls
William
him Neil.
Mr. Shepherd, that's who. We need you to unmute, please.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Yeah. All right, great. And what number would you say?
1.
Okay, the number is actually 3, and I'll show you the number. There it is.
Ah.
3. So
It's not 7.
that means the blues are going to go. You can elect to go first or second.
I say 2nd.
Okay, so that means reds are going to be in the fishbowl first. So what I'd like all of you blues to do is to mute yourself and turn off your video.
You
So
mean
then I can only,
unmute, right?
no, mute,
No,
Oh, okay, sorry.
because the reds are going to be in the middle, and the reds are going to unmute. And make sure I see your camera. Red 1. Jack, I need you to mute your camera, please, or turn off your camera. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got 7 reds. Excellent.
Okay.
Good job, you guys. That was your first test. Okay, so go ahead if you're a red and you're there, you can go ahead and unmute. Norm, I need you to please mute and turn off your camera. Norm Lane, please turn off your camera. Joanne, would you help him with his camera, please? Okay, so Reds, you can go ahead and be unmuted, and I'm going to turn the question over to you. And just as if you were in a room wanting to discuss this, what do you feel is the benefit of the conservative view of governing our country? Where do you see us? What are the benefits? How about we start with you? Go ahead and unmute yourself, though, Mr. Shepherd. Neil, unmute yourself, please.
I'm trying.
You're there. You're
Can you
unmuted.
hear me now?
I can hear you.
The host had to ask us to be unmuted, otherwise we couldn't do it. Just so you know.
Okay. All right.
Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Abraham Lincoln said that you do a man no favor when you give him what he could have earned. And I think the conservative view is such that we allow people to earn what they need, what they want. And as a result of doing that, they're happier, they're more fulfilled. And that's basically what basic conservative policy. And it's kind of like the, if you give a man a fish to eat, he'll be hungry tomorrow. Teach him how to fish, he won't be hungry again. And I could go on and on about that, but that's the basic bottom line. What's somebody else got to say? Nobody?
Well, I'm a conservative because I believe conservatism offers the broadest scope and the widest possible space for the exercise of liberty, which is a proxy for what, not just a proxy, it's what the Declaration of Independence refers to as the pursuit of happiness. And I think conservatism accomplishes that based on 4 pillars: limited government, free markets, a strong national defense with American leadership abroad, and a deference to traditional values. If I could come back to limited government, that just doesn't mean limitation as to the size of government. It means it refers to checks and balances by which the legislative and judicial branches keep the executive in check, and vice versa. It refers to also to the principle of subsidiarity, which is that the lowest level of government capable of accomplishing a governmental task is assigned that task, and everything is not, in our case, administered by the federal government. That would be my take on conservatism.
Well, my take is somewhat similar. I think for me, one of the most radical documents, if not the most radical political document, is the Declaration of Independence, where it says that we get our rights, God-given rights, by the mere fact that we are human beings. We don't get it from kings, we don't get it from government, which at the time that was written was an extraordinarily radical idea. We as individuals have rights. We are the people or the group that actually runs this country, and government is actually our servant. And by going ahead and ascribing those feelings, then it allows me to go ahead and do whatever I want within certain confines, recognized confines of society. I don't have to get permission to do certain things. And it is one of those things that over time, it seems like so many professions, so many obligations, or so many jobs, you have to get permission, whether it's, braiding hair or getting certain regulatory permissions. And my feeling is basically is that the government is there to help, but it is not there to go ahead and control. Now, there are limits on that, of course.
I guess my comments would be along the lines that I've always been kind of my own businessman. So I've worked for companies, but I've typically been in a role I've been in sales basically my whole life. And if I didn't work, then I didn't earn money from my family to take care of my family. And while I would consider myself a pretty moderate Republican, I think that the policies are really what I look to as opposed to the personalities. And I think some of the issues, especially that we have today, is politics revolve so much more around personalities than policies that it divides us as people. I'm conservative here. One of my good friends in our club is Joanne Hilton, who's very much a Democrat and much more liberal than I am. But I completely respect her opinion. And I think that there's one thing we need to do, and I guess I'm getting away from really the question, is just listen to each other with more mutual respect. And hopefully both sides can do that.
Yeah.
Well, mine is pretty simple. I hear what you're all saying. I believe what you're all saying. But for me, I believe our side takes everybody into consideration. It thinks of all the people, not just particular people groups that are loud, but it cares about all Americans. And that's really important to me.
Anything else, Deborah? You still have time.
I know. Thank you.
We
But
can come back to you if you.
no, I mean,
Okay.
we are equal, and people just need to really take heart to that. We are equal. We need to treat everybody that way and fairly. And I just believe that's more of on the conservative side. So.
Yeah,
Well,
I
why
think
not? There, Mike.
is there time, Ann? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, there definitely is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just believe that our founding fathers created it, just like Deborah said, for us to have a mutual respect and understanding and to create dialogue. And it's okay to have differences of opinions. And we should respect each other and love each other through those different opinions. It's kind of how our country was built and grounded. And like Tim was saying about the Declaration of Independence, you know, with that, it's those documents that gave us the ability to have the right to pursue happiness. And that pursuit of happiness is why so many people flock to our country, because they have the opportunity to pursue happiness, whatever that means to them, whether it means working for a company for their whole life, which is awesome, or starting a company and hiring
So,
people.
Michael, I'm just going to interrupt
Yeah.
and say, so this is how you see your side, your view of conservatism is that this is better because conservatives have this view.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's
I'm just making it clear.
yeah. Well, I think that the pursuit of happiness is part of that. I think that it was formed that way, and that the conservatives really believe in that, because with big government, you're held back from that pursuit of happiness, because you have a lot of rules and regulations that are roadblocks. And so I think that the conservatives want to have those freedoms that we're right now we're allowed to have certain freedoms to be able to do what we want to do, and to bless other people and be there for other people and help others. And so that's what I see a lot of on the conservative side.
Yeah, have I heard from everybody that was read about what you see as your view is the conservative view is better for the country?
This is Frank Ally.
Yeah.
I'm stuck here in the conservative room. I'm actually a libertarian. But in Lynette's world, that means I'm an R. I do agree substantially with a lot of the conservative thought, but here's the basic reason, and everybody needs to understand this. The history of the world is brutal. The history of the world is oppressors and oppressed. And it wasn't until the Age of Enlightenment, it wasn't until the American Revolution actually took some radical ideas, where the first time in the history of mankind that the people finally became the rulers. I think it was Tim that said is government is our servant. And we created a system for the first time in history where government was our service. And if you look at the history of mankind, you will see the greatest evil ever perpetrated by mankind upon itself involves centralized, powerful governments. And the American Revolution was designed to get away from that, to give the people, for the first time in history, the power to control where they lived. And what's happened is, over the last 250 years, this experiment has been eroding slowly, and then quicker and quicker.
Okay, I'm just going to have you please stay with what your view is, that the conservative view. So
this is my view. The view is, the reason I'm a conservative / libertarian is because I've read history. I understand economics. And what's happened is, the larger and more centralized we make a government, the less freedom we have as individuals. And eventually those freedoms will erode to such a point where this great experiment that we have embarked in will be destroyed completely. And we'll end up in a Mao or a Hitler or a Lenin, Stalin, or all the great mass murderers of the 20th century that were done not by Democrats, not by liberals, but by centralized, powerful governments who have taken control over the individual liberties of people to a point where those liberties have disappeared. So the idea of being a conservative or a libertarian is to protect the individuals so that the individuals can excel as they move forward and mankind can advance.
Great. Thank you, Frank. That's a great turning point now that we're going to take again with the Reds. What's a concern or concerns that you have about the conservative view, either currently or for the future? What are some of your concerns?
Well, one of my concerns or an overriding concern, I tend to be a fiscal conservative and more libertarian, I guess, when it comes to social things. What other people want to do within certain confines is fine with me. I don't need to comment on it or anything else of that sort. And sometimes the conservative view is such that it's not just limited government, but almost no government. We have over 330 million people, give or take, in this country. Not everybody is able to go ahead and take care of themselves. Not everybody is strong enough, either mentally or physically, or age issues or whatever. And there has to be some means of going ahead as a society of providing for those folks, giving them a hand. Now the question is it a hand? Is it a safety net? Is it a hand up? It's a matter of degree, but I'm concerned where a very strong or view of conservatism is no government or such limited government that we just kind of eschew those folks that really can't help themselves or need really a hand up. So.
Thanks, Tim. Who else?
Oh,
Are you frozen, Tom?
No, can you hear me?
Now I can, yeah. It was like
Okay.
you were frozen for a second.
Sorry. Conservatism has never been particularly good on race, stretching back to the 50s and 60s. Our emphasis on liberty didn't seem to extend to the victims of Jim Crow laws, for example, in the 50s and 60s. And I think that's a place where we could have done better and where we conservatives have to look to do better. Another is my own view of conservatism involves the projection of American values abroad by way of defense of the United States. That leads us into places like Vietnam or Iraq, where we don't seem to be able to get out or to project our values. So I think that's an Achilles heel for the conservative movement as well.
Great.
I have an issue with the conservative movement in these out of control budget deficits, which seem to increase regardless of whether there's an R or a D in the office. Our deficit is so out of control now that it's just a matter of time before we deal with hyperinflationary issues and then more government regulation and powers to try to bring that in. I think the conservatives have failed when they're in power to rein in the overreach of the federal government, to limit the bureaucracy and the centralization of federal government. And I've been very disappointed in watching those who call themselves conservatives in office, who view their ascension into office as license to continue their pet spending or their pet increases of government services, instead of maintaining a consistent conservative outlook, which would be to limit and scale back this scope and size and breadth of the federal government.
Right.
I think one of my biggest concerns is just whether the leadership within, the Conservative Party have been telling as much truth as they should have been. I just was very disappointed in all the issues around the elections. I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit of inconsistency in ballot results and how they get counted in every election, because it's such a massive process to count all those votes. But to say that there was just this overriding election fraud and to have that promulgated by my party just didn't seem, that really concerned me, that we were just really going out on the edge. And then it just seems like the news agenda, you watch CNN and then you watch Fox, and it's like they're on two different planets from their perspectives. And I just, I don't think most of us as Americans are that far apart that in the way that it's shown vis-a-vis the media. But I do believe that, we haven't been as transparent and as forthcoming as we should have been. It's been a big concern of mine.
Great comments, you guys. Okay, who else? Deborah, Michael, Neil, we hear from you.
Well, I think for me, disappointment would be just, I don't know, I sense a lot of cowering against the opposition right now. And I think the Conservatives need to stand strong. And, many people tend to be losing jobs because of comments or things like that. But I just think we need to hear the other side, but not be afraid as Conservatives to truly take a stand in the right way, with the right voice and ears, to be heard and to not cower away or feel threatened. I just feel there's a lot of Conservatives that are cowering, so I just think the party needs to step it up. So, period.
Okay, thanks.
I couldn't agree more, Deborah. I think that Conservatives need to be involved. I think something that's been disappointing to me is that saying, like you said, like there's a fear of losing their job or people unfriending them. And I think we need to get involved, even at the lowest level in politics, just to have a voice and to share that voice is so important. I think that our party has really failed in that area. They feel defeated. Neil, you're muted.
Yeah, there you go. We can hear
Am
you.
I unmuted now?
You are.
Yeah.
I am? Okay.
Yes.
The best way I think I can illustrate this is I was listening to something on the TV or something, and it was a question answer. And the question that was asked by a black man, he asked, when was America great for me? So you're saying make America great again. When was it great for me? And that kind of crystallizes what I think maybe the conservative thing is not too great about. Okay.
Great. Thank you all so much. Very thoughtful responses, and I appreciate all of you so very much. And now if I could have you turn off your camera, mute yourselves, and we're going to listen to all of our blues. And blues, you can turn your cameras on if you're a blue. Turn your cameras on and your mics. You can now get yourself unmuted. Let's see, make sure we got everybody. I'm just going to say, if you're not a panelist, I need you to please turn off your camera. Okay. And I think sometimes if you're the second to go, there's a rebuttal. There's like, okay, I want to say something back to what Neil just said, or I'd really like to respond to what Tom said. But what we're going to do is to stay with the question. Maria, I don't think you're a panelist, are you? Maria Rice?
No, I'm not.
Okay, I need you to mute yourself and turn off your video, please. Just if you're a blue panelist. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to all of you. And the question is, well, how do you see the more liberal side as benefiting the country? Why do you think that's benefits our country? Jack, you can unmute if you'd like.
Thank you. Okay. All right. I was muted. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'll go since.
Good, you're brave, Suzanne.
So, you know, I think that part of the issue is that, and it actually was something I believe that Tim mentioned, is that we definitely have a lot of people that can't fend for themselves and can't pull themselves up. And unfortunately, a lot of it does have to do with other issues that are going on, you know, in the country and have throughout the years. Lack of making enough money to afford housing and to afford insurance and stuff like that. But I do think that, you know, for the Democrat side or the liberal side I feel that we're more conscientious about the people who are out there that do need the help. And yes, certainly there's going to be people out there that take advantage of the system. You're always going to have that. But, you know, we do want to be out there and help people with food insecurity and help them with housing issues. And certainly the health insurance is a big thing. And, you know, when things happen like natural disasters or like what we're going through right now with the pandemic, it really shines a light on just how the disadvantage how far apart they are from those who have the advantages.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we do need to be there to help people. It's humanity. I mean, that's just how I feel about it. It's just being human and caring for one another. And it's not all about me, 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 me. And, you know, I might not have a lot, but if I see somebody else that has even less than me, I'm going to share what I have with them. And I think that we need more of that in this country. And certainly I feel like I've seen the worst part of our country certainly during this pandemic, and what's happened to the people who are suffering and are not getting the help. And just like the money that was sent out, like the PPP loans, there's a lot of businesses that really should have gotten those loans that didn't, and a lot of businesses that shouldn't have gotten them.
So I'm just going to interrupt you for a second,
Yeah.
Suzanne. So you feel that the liberal view or the liberal policies help our country by helping everyone, or what? If
Yes, by wanting everyone to have, they talked about the pursuit of happiness and the dream, the American dream and stuff like that, is not everyone has the ability to strive for that.
Okay.
And for those that don't, I believe as liberals, what we want to do is try and help them get to that point.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll go next.
Yeah, Neelam.
Okay. So one of the things that the red said was from
excuse me, we're not going to do that because that's rebuttal. We're not going to do rebuttal.
No, it's not rebuttal. It's going on. Was the that Declaration of Independence and that all men are created equal, which is the same thing that Suzanne said. And then my take on that is that we should promote equality in our country, and which is a liberal view. And equality has to do with equality in opportunity and equality in the pursuit of happiness and liberty. And if you are hungry and if you don't have a roof over your head, then there is no equality. So one of the liberal views or liberal mindset is to treat everybody as equal Americans. That would be one. The second one is to also provide opportunity for everyone, not for some, but for everyone. And in order for that to happen, we must have living wages and opportunities for employment. If we have no living wage, then there is no opportunity. And the next point in the liberal thinking is affordable education. We have seen in our country what happens when people are not educated. Number one, many people believe in those conspiracy theories and other things, which if people were educated, they would question. They would question, and yet so many cannot afford education because it is so expensive. And the ones who do get educated, many of them have tremendous student loans. And that goes back again to the question of equality. The third issue is healthcare. That's another thing that the liberals believe in, that all of our citizens, all Americans, their health is important and we need to take care of that. And fair taxation, checks and balances also means that the tax law should be more equitable, that the middle class should not have to support the entire nation. And that's one area where I believe that the liberals think about, again, the entire country instead of just a few, and also to take care of the children and the elderly. In other developed nations all over the world, all the developed nations afford free daycare at people's workplaces. People's workplaces, and free transportation and healthcare for the seniors. You know, everybody comes into this world a child, and everyone leaves this world an old person. And so those are the two most vulnerable aspects of our community, and we need to support them. And finally, we have just one environment, and if we destroy it, we don't have a choice. So the liberals focus on taking care of the environment.
Thank you, Neelam. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Shall I go?
Yes, please do.
All right. My ideology is moderate liberal, and my political affiliation is independent. The question being, why are the liberal policies, values good for our country? I believe the fundamental belief of liberalism to correcting any existing and past policies that thwart the individual independence and well-being. And I'm going to just list these things in the alphabetic order. Liberal view supports civil rights, equal rights, healthcare, property rights, reproductive rights, separation of religion and state, voting rights, and welfare of the neediest member of the society. So those are the things that I believe liberalism supports, and it is good for the overall health of society with those actions and thoughts.
Thank you. Are you complete?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I'll go next. It's funny because when this question was sent out to us, I remembered the conversation that I had with my parents when I announced that I was a liberal, and it's still basically the same 5 reasons that I consider myself a liberal today. And so looking at my notes that I made, it's the protection of individual liberty and opportunity, equality for all people, fiscal responsibility, accountability for those in power, and protecting the environment. And that's why I consider myself a liberal.
And how do you see that good for the country?
I see that as being a necessary check on what I would call sort of an inertia of power. There is a tradition of people who have power to try to keep it. And, I tend to think that the liberal process is to try to bring new people into power.
Okay, I'm next.
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Okay. I think the liberal view is that we do need some intervention from the government. We do need some control and regulations. Just because we want the government to step in and help protect people does not mean we want a dictatorship. But what has happened in this country without these kinds of regulations is that the gap between those who have money, those who don't, the economic gap has gotten larger and larger. And it seems like the people on the lower end of the scale are not getting the help that the people on the other end. I do think their increased minimum wage, healthcare for all, unemployment benefits, I don't think those are entitlement programs. I think that the liberals think that those are people's rights. On the other hand, I think that the entitlement program is going to the wealthy, because the way that everything has been set up in these past years, we not only have millionaires, we have billionaires in this country. The last tax cut was a gift for corporations and for wealthy individuals. So I think that the government needs to step in a little bit and equalize things so that the poor have a better chance to come out of their situation. I don't think working hard is going to do it. People at $9 an hour can have 3 jobs and still need assistance. So I think that's one of the liberal policies of views.
Thanks, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
Jack, Keith, we haven't heard from you yet.
Okay, I think what I'm going to say is that my focus is going to be more general, and that's to be what a liberal is in America. And I believe that liberals are, this applies to what a lot of people said previously, is I think we need to be all inclusive. We have to have compassion, we have to have justice, because our country is constantly changing and being reborn, okay? And that's where I think that's where liberals start from, with compassion and justice and including everyone. When it comes to my concerns, I'll talk, when you ask question 2, I'll come to that one, but that's.
Okay. And it's good for the country to have liberal policies, because to have these.
Liberal policies are good, but they have to be accepted by conservatives. Okay, we have to have compromise, and compromise to me also involves compassion and justice.
Great. Okay, good. Keith?
I struggle a lot with how the question was phrased, because I think the labels of liberal and conservative tend to put us in an us and them camp. And I found myself agreeing with most of what was said in our earlier session. But for me, the difference really comes down to, I think of the liberal position as being a more progressive position, a recognition that the world is constantly going through change. And if we look at recent history, the pandemic, certainly no one expected the pandemic, no one was prepared for the pandemic, but how we handled the pandemic, in my view, was to ignore science and to, rather than bring the nation together and fight it, to create division. And I think the liberal position tends to be one of respect the experts and recognize that situations change. And with those changes, you have to change your behaviors. No one wants more taxes. No one wants bigger government, but government has a role to play. As someone who spent many years living in Texas, what Texas has been struggling through was entirely foreseeable, because for decades, Texas has chosen to deregulate. And so their grid was simply unprepared, because it had always been, lowest bidder kind of activities. And so I was not surprised at all when the systems failed. The position I think we have to take is, when America was founded, our country was largely empty. And so rugged individualism was absolutely necessary to survive. With 330 million people, and the population of the world approaching 8 billion people, it's become a very crowded place. And as individuals, we of course want freedom and flexibility to do whatever we want. But we have to recognize that we all live in a shared space, and that if someone else is polluting my water or my air or creating unsafe conditions, that impacts my ability to pursue life, liberty. And so we have to have a mechanism for dealing with that. And I think that government has a role to play. And the trick is, how do you get effective government that serves the people, not controls the people?
Great comments, everybody. Again, I'm just with all your panelists, you're doing, I'm learning a lot. So now we're going to turn the question to, what are your concerns about more liberal policies, how they go forward, how they are right now, how they go forward? What are some of your concerns about it?
So I'm happy to start that, because it plays in exactly with where I was going, which is the risk is always that when you ask the government to do something, that they will do it badly. And I think, the conservative view of minimalist government, by definition, puts some checks and balances there. If you ask the government to help on issues like the environment or healthcare or education, the risk is that it will put in place policies or people who don't effectively do their job. And so it's always the risk that you have to, whenever you give someone power, create the checks and balances and the competencies there to do it well.
Great. Other concerns, Carol, Jack, Suzanne, Bill?
Yeah, I have a concern, and that is that liberal policies sometimes open themselves up to extremes that people think we are. For instance, things like defund the police, Green New Deal. I can't think of what else. Open borders. All of that, liberals, they all get lumped into the liberal policy, which I don't think that. Well, I know they aren't. I just think that it makes it harder to explain what a liberal is when you have extremes that feel like they're a part of it or appear to be.
I agree with Carol. I think that comes into when I was talking about being liberal, being all-inclusive, is that we do have, and you'll have so many different opinions. And we talk about liberal and conservative. Liberals also need to come to, say, especially, I'm going to say the Democratic Party, they need to come to conscience as to what they are as a group, and not either, because we're made up of individuals, basically, but those individuals have to get the listeners, and they have to compromise, like I was mentioning before, about even between liberals and conservatives. So but Carol, I agree with everything Carol said. Just the case of liberals having, let's call it a little more discipline and a little more look at, we're concerned about humanity and compassion. So we have to realize that we all have to live together.
Somebody's, I don't know, somebody's got a radio or something on. I need you to please mute.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. Bill, I think you were going to speak as Jack started.
I was going to start a moment ago. The biggest problem that I see with a lot of liberalism as it's framed in our culture is that it tends towards authoritarianism. It goes from a position of speaking out against hate to wanting to stop people from speaking. The idea of controlling other people, I think what a lot of people in popular culture are calling cancel culture right now, is something that springs from a lot of the worst instincts that I see in parts of the liberal movement. And it concerns me because I'm a huge proponent of free speech, of an open shared dialogue between all people.
Yeah, Neelam.
I just think that the liberals really don't know how to frame their ideas. We have seen, I'm a college professor and I teach communications, and I have realized over the years that the word liberal has become a dirty word without people understanding what being liberal really means. And in education, liberal means liberal education, which allows you to think for yourself, which teaches you critical thinking and looking at evidence before reaching conclusions. But the word liberal has become a negative, dirty word. So I feel that the first thing the liberals need to do is reframe the terminology. George Lakoff, a Berkeley professor who was an expert in linguistics, said that quite a few years ago, is that we are really not very good at framing our issues. When we start talking about liberalism, we tend to pile up 200 items, and so the message is lost. So that's one of the things we need to do as liberals, or our politicians, elected officials. They need to start framing the concepts more carefully. And personally, I really believe, I don't see too many liberal policies. I don't. I think they're attempted, but they don't make it. They don't make it. All the things that you've all mentioned, those are just so far, most of them in recent years especially have just been concepts. So I think that the liberals must learn to frame the issues. Going along exactly with what Bill said, is that when we talk about reducing violence against Black men, we just say, stop funding the police or defund the police. And that's an issue of phrasing. And so I think that would be that's
your concern.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Okay, we haven't heard from you, Suzanne, yeah, go ahead, Gopal.
Yes, my problem and my concern with liberal views is that in the zeal to correct the past problems, the people, and being a cook, I use the analogy, a microwave liberalism, that you press a button and solution will come up in a few seconds. For example, going too far with their beliefs, tuition forgiveness. I know recently has come up. I remember going to college and working for my tuition, and now there seems to be kids come out of a college with $50,000 debt, the way they spend it, and now we want to forgive it. I think that's a wrong thinking. Defunding of police, yes, there are bad police officers. So defunding is not going to solve that problem. In fact, the bad guys are going to like that. So going too far there. And forgiveness, blanket forgiveness for all people who are illegally in the country. They entered illegally or overstayed their stay. I'm a naturalized citizen. I remember what I had to do to come here legally and stay here legally. And I think that should be looked at. And the final thing now is coming up is the management by thesaurus, that the illegal alien, there's so much time is being spent in thinking of the other word for that. So it's again going too far to correct the past problems and not going in a orderly fashion. That's a concern to me. And that then, as Anilam just said, gets bad rap on that because it is put forth in that fashion. So those are the concerns I have.
Great. Okay, that leaves you, Suzanne.
So, quite honestly, I personally believe that both parties are a big mess right now. I'm not happy with my party. I'm not happy with the other party. I think that greed and power have just overtaken so many of our politicians today. and it's very sad. One of the issues I see is just the infighting among the Democratic Party, and you know, the old guard versus the new guard. And I think that we have to be more open to the young guard, to the freshmen that are coming in. You know, I personally believe that it's our youth that's going to save us. We've all seen how our youth have stepped up between the gun violence and the climate change and all of that. They're really coming forward. And quite honestly, they're fighting for their world. You know, I'm almost 60. And so this is their world. And even me, what I do, I'm fighting for my daughter's world, for any grandchildren that I'm going to have. And I think that we have to be willing to listen to more about what they have to say. And yes, change is hard, and you might think that they're way out there in some of their thinking. But I do believe that we have to be more willing, or our government has to be more willing to listen to the younger people that are coming up, and what they have to say and how they feel, and what their thinking is on how some of these things can be worked on, and we can fix some of the problems that we have here in the United States. So for me, it's just the infighting, and I just think we're just not cohesive. I don't think either of the parties are.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you all very much. You all did a great job. And now what we're going to do is everybody that is a panelist, if you're a panelist, go ahead and unmute yourself and turn on your video, and we're going to come back as a group. And what we're going to do now is to process what we've just heard. I happen to love moderating Fishbowl because every single time I hear something and it affects me, and I think, wow, I never thought of it like that. So I thank you all for your very well thought out comments. And what we're going to do is, if somebody would like to just begin, we're going to take maybe about 15 minutes or so and process, what did you learn about the other side? Specifically, did you see anything in common?
I wrote down 3 quick things that I liked Bill Bowen's comment about inertia of power.
Who's this? Who's speaking?
This is Clark.
Oh, Clark. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
I just had 3 quick comments. I like what Bill had to say about inertia of power. And maybe he could even expand on that a little bit more. I appreciated what Jack said about compassion and justice. And I think even as a conservative, I think that's a really important that we have those values on both sides. And I think it was Keith that said, you know, we want a government that serves the people, not controls the people. And we certainly need government. I mean, what's happened in Texas, there's a lot of people suffering. They need help, whether it's from FEMA or, you know, within the state of Texas and whatever they can do. I mean, it's a horrible thing. And this pandemic has just crushed so many small business owners and so many families and people that are disadvantaged. They need help. So, you know, just from the conservative side, I appreciated those remarks made by.
So you saw something in common, Clark?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Cool. Well, all right. So Clark, you're a red. Could I get a blue? Go ahead, Bill. You're a blue.
I was going to say, since Clark called me out, I'll call him and Tim and Michael and Neil and everyone. That I heard a lot of common thread, and one of the reasons I brought up that conversation I had with my parents, where I announced that I was a liberal, was because listening to all of you reminds me of how my dad laughed at me when we had that conversation. Because he was an old school Republican, you know, born in the 40s and raised in the 50s. And he said, conservation, that's a conservative value, right? Strong public schools, equality, that's our value. What are you doing claiming that that's a liberal value? That's not a liberal value. And so as I listened to all of you speak, that was a running theme that I had, is how similar we actually are on a lot of this. I think that there might be variance in how we would implement things, or small choices here and there. But I think overall, if you were to put in front of us, would we like to have good schools for our kids? Yes, we would. Would we like to have clean air and water? Yes, we would, right? And then it's just a matter of how do we get there? And so I felt a lot of common ground with all the speakers today.
Great. Thanks, Bill. All right. How about a red?
Yeah, I would echo what Bill said. I was not surprised, but very pleased to hear various things that people said that, you sit there and say, yes, I agree with that. It may be a matter of degree and how you approach it. One of the things that I did think a lot of the discussion centered around in both sides was power and how it goes awry. How do you adjust it? And again, I think that's a matter of degree. I think Keith made some very good points about, yeah, we want government to do certain things, but there's a danger there. And when it doesn't do it right. I think I feel that actually in our country, conservatives and liberals are a lot closer than maybe we think we are, or how it appears in the media.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. All righty. How about a blue?
So I was actually surprised to hear how much compassion that I heard from the other side, and acknowledging the fact that there are many people in our country who are struggling and do need some help. Because from our government on that side, I don't see that, and I don't hear that. I don't hear those words coming out of our government on the Republican side. So it is nice to hear it from the speakers who are here, that they do acknowledge that there are definitely people who need help, and that we do need to provide help for them. So that was very nice to hear, because again, I just feel from the government side of it, I don't see or feel that. So
okay, so that was, I hear you saying that was kind of a surprise, because I think sometimes we hear surprising things from the other side.
Yeah, and I don't know that I want to say a surprise, because I mean, I certainly have friends who are Republicans and stuff, but it was a very welcome to hear that, and to know that people feel that compassion that I feel for those of us who struggle and stuff.
Great, thank you. All right, a red turn. We're going red, blue, red, blue.
Well,
yeah, Tom?
Yeah, well, echoing some of my fellow red team members, I also want to claim Mr. Bowen as a member of the red team, not the blue team. Every one of his items, I think, stacks up nicely with classical liberalism, which is today conservatism. And I long ago accepted the notion that those who regard themselves as liberals today, or progressives, which is the term of art these days, are animated by the best of intentions, that is, to help people who find themselves in difficulty. But I think the dividing line between those who would regard themselves as conservatives of any stripe, whether libertarians like Frank, or more traditional conservatives like myself, between conservatives on the one hand and liberals, is the dividing line is that conservatives have a built-in suspicion that whatever the government does carries with it a dark side of power, or as Bill referred to, a risk of authoritarianism. Liberals, on the other hand, largely see, it seems to be, only the upside of government action, that it'll remedy some specific problem without considering the long-term effects. Perhaps one example of that would be the pending legislation on COVID relief, which is—
Tom, I'm going to interrupt you, because where we're going to stay with is what you learned about the other side and what you saw that you had in common. Okay.
I'll just leave it where I said then. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'll go next.
Neelam.
Some of the terms that were used by our red friends were just wonderful. They just made me feel so warm and warm and fuzzy and happy. And those were fairness and justice for all and compassion. Because what that showed me is that what all of you believe and what is shown to us on the media are not in line with each other. Because usually from our red presenters, media figures, icons, I never hear these terms. I never hear fairness. I never hear justice for all, and I don't hear compassion. So it was wonderful to hear that from you. And thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Neelam.
Is it Neelam? Is it
Yes.
that right? Neelam. So
Yes.
what you said earlier really resonated with me about the communication and just the framework of how we think and feel. And I totally agree with you. I think that there's a lot of common ground between liberals and conservatives. I do think that the far right and the far left tend to muck up what we think and say. And so I've seen a lot of common ground, things that you, Carol, Gopal, Bill has said has really resonated with what I think. And I know that a lot of stuff that happens out there in the world today with media and the internet, that a lot of what both of us think and say gets muffled. And so I think I haven't heard as much compassion on the liberal side throughout the last couple of years, for sure. Just like I'm sure you haven't heard that from us, but it sounds like we all have a common ground that we love humanity and we love our country, and we believe still that our country wants to help and wants to love people and meet them where they're at and give them a hand up and teach them how to fish and let them become awesome citizens of this country that then they can go and help other people too. And like Suzanne said, we don't, I don't have a lot of money, but I love spending my time and what I have to help others that may not even have as much as I do. And I don't have much, but what I have, I want to be able to help with. So I love that you said that earlier, Suzanne. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about today's discussion for sure. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay.
I'm ready.
Another blue? How about you, Karen?
Ready. Okay. I have to admit something to everybody. When I was asked to do this, I said, I don't think I want to, because the only thing liberals and conservatives have in common is we all like puppies. That was it. I have really been surprised and pleased at how much we are on the same page. Words like compassion, fighting for people that need it. Government needs to help when we have catastrophes. We couldn't get through it without them. Lincoln, the values of Lincoln, he certainly was all inclusive in equal rights for everyone. I just am really, really pleased at noticing all the things that we do have in common.
Thanks, Carol. How about you, Frank? We haven't heard from you yet.
I'm with the people who are looking at Bowen saying, hey, he's a closet libertarian over there. And with Neelam and with Carol, I have to say, you have to understand.
Watch your email box, Bill.
those of us who are libertarians, those of us who are conservatives, the reason we're conservatives, the reason we're libertarian is because we believe in the individual, in the individual's ability to make their way in this life.
Right.
As
and
Bill
what
said,
you saw in common, interrupting.
what Bill had to say
okay.
was Bill had to say, we should be concerned about the authoritarianism element of liberalism.
Mm-hmm.
As Frederick Hayek wrote in a book called The Road of Serfdom, that is a message that Bill seems to embrace, that there should be a very big concern about centralizing this government power. And what Neelam had to say is it is really about the individual and what's the best way to lift individuals up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're all in agreement that it's about the individuals, it's about equality, it's about freedom. We all have the same goal. The question is, how do we get there without, like Bill said, going down this march on the road to serfdom?
Okay. Thank you. All right, let's see, we haven't heard from you, Jack.
Well, I was a little surprised from what I heard from Mr. Shepherd, Mr. Cahill, because I believe that's also a liberal view about giving or teaching regarding to fishing. And so that impressed me. But I don't think that's strictly liberal or conservative thought.
And I think Gopal wanted to say something, but he's.
Yeah, but you're muted. We need to have you unmute, Gopal.
Has to be invited to unmute though. There we go.
There you go.
All right. There's a lot of sayings going on, and there's a saying that a lot of people use, teach people how to fish. They're saying, let them, do their own thing. But my line next to that is, but allow them access to the fishing pond.
Right. And what did you, I'm going to interrupt you because where we're at is, what did you see that you have in common, or what did you
learn? The common I
learn
found
about the other
was
side?
that everybody wants to teach people how to fish. That's a very good thing. That means educate, that means voting, that is all those. But my attachment to that is it had to be made easy for them to fish. And they need a fishing rod and they need a right to the fishing pond.
Right. And did you see that you have that in common? Did you hear any of that?
Oh, yes, I saw the first part common very much. I don't think the second part was discussed as much.
Okay. Well, this is just the start, everybody. Okay. Who did I not hear from? Did I hear from everybody? Yeah, I didn't hear from you. Okay. Deborah.
Okay. So I did hear some things in common, which were good. But I also hear that we are all Rotarians and we have a focus and a purpose. So perhaps in common would be sharing our voices in this manner with others, to be willing to listen, but to be willing to be heard.
Great. Keith, did you had something else to say?
Can I just say something quickly?
Yeah, Jack.
I was impressed because I did not know that Deborah was a conservative. So that.
Well, in all honesty, I'm willing to fluctuate based on who I feel has the best going forward.
Right.
You know, I don't pigeonhole myself. So.
Okay. Keith, were you going to say something else?
Yeah, I thought maybe you were playing the devil's advocate, but I understand now.
Okay, great. How about?
So I guess what I would like to offer is I have most of my life been an independent. And because we're all Rotarians, because I know several of these people and talk with them, I understand that, you know, we all share more than we disagree on. My hope is, as we continue this conversation, we can figure out why that seems to still translate to so much disagreement at the governmental level. And that given that we as a group, and maybe this is just because we're all Rotarians and doesn't represent society as a whole, how we can all be so close in our views and have such a schism in our country and in sort of the public discourse.
Well, I've heard that a couple times now because of Rotarians, and I do think there's something very unique to Rotarians. If you've ever been to an international conference and you see people from all over the world that in the nightly news, they have weapons and they come together to figure out how to build wells. And however, I will say, because I've been involved with Braver Angels now for a couple of years, that this happens every time. And I've had people who are adamant at the very beginning that the other side has nothing to offer them, nothing in common with them. And at the end, they're willing to listen and they see that there is some common ground that they can walk on. It was wonderful. You are a wonderful group. Lynette, you did a great job in who to invite, and everybody was so well spoken. And I would invite all of you, if you're at all interested, to if you want more of this, to go to braverangels.org. They have workshops, they have debates, they have full day workshops. They're doing something that they have just started in 2020 called with 2021 rather, called With Malice Toward None. As a result of, this began in 2016 as a result of an election, and 2021 as a result of the next election. Many, many things that can come out of this, but if nothing else, to go back into your communities or your families and be willing to listen, because that is the magic of what happens here. I'm going to take maybe another 5 minutes or so before we close out, and I thank Lynette and Joanne, but I'd love to hear what you just thought of the process itself, of this coming together. Yeah, Michael. You're muted.
Sorry, it seems like if we hit mute, we can't unmute without permission.
Oh, okay.
and I just wanted to say that, you know, it's awesome to see, and I guess this does have a lot to do with us all being Rotarians and being like-minded and a lot of Rotarian things, but it's just really refreshing to see that we're all more kindred spirits than we might have thought coming into this. So I think that Braver Angels is definitely onto something, because this is awesome.
Yeah. And this is my own, I'm just going to throw in my own personal belief here. This is how we begin to change. You change, really, it's going to start at the bottom. It's not starting at the top, and we can see that. So,
right.
Anybody else of what you thought of the actual process itself?
I thought it was fabulous. Establishing ground rules in the beginning, I think, is a wonderful idea. I used to take part in a series of trainings for faculty. It was called Great Teacher Seminars.
Oh, yeah.
And we would all get together from various colleges all over California, and we would talk about things. And there were very clear guidelines. And if you have clear guidelines, I think then the outcome is positive. But if you let people just talk, then it's chaos. So I think it was a wonderful process. And I'm wondering if you have this available for college and university students also.
Yes, they do. They will come in. All you need to do is connect. And we have an alliance. It's called the Sacramento Alliance, and that is here. So there's a national organization, and they're branching out into many different areas. Yeah.
Wonderful. So thank you so much.
Jacopo. Yes.
Yes, very well managed and very well followed. So many group discussions wear off into personal and other nonsensical things. So this was wonderfully done, both by you and the people who participated. It was delightful.
Yes. And I would like to meet everybody in person as soon as this COVID thing is over.
Yes. Yeah.
How do we get Congress to go through this?
That's what I think, Suzanne. I would like to go in and do some.
Because as I said before, you know, what I heard here today is not at all what I hear coming out of Congress. And so, you know, maybe we all just need to take over. Maybe the Rotarians need to take over and run the world. I don't know.
Write letters. So,
you know, I would just like to make a comment on that, is that when we talk about our country is much broader, much fuller, much richer than any of the politicians or governments, whether they're state, local, or national. We have to remember that our country is the guy next door, the person down the street, and Rotarians and others. And so by going ahead and focusing on that and separating the politicians are there for power. We're here as community members and as fellow citizens.
thank you, Tim. And with that, I'm going to, I could spend a lot of time talking about this.
One quick thing?
Yeah, Carol.
I just want to say that I know this was a lot of work for Lynette. I know she really believes in this, and I wanted to thank her
Yes.
One thing, you did an excellent job keeping us on track
Oh.
and keeping the times and everything. So thank you. You did a great job.
Yeah, great job.
And that's what I would like to do, is to first of all, thank Joanne. Thank you. How many participants did we have, Joanne? How many did you end up?
94.
94. And
94.
Joanne took care of bringing them in, making sure they weren't having their dogs barking in the background, and just a tremendous job. Thank you so much, Joanne. The technology was perfect. And I can't thank Lynette enough. I mean, I feel like I've gotten to know you, Lynette, through this whole process of putting this together, and how much she worked at this. And will I say fight? I know that's not a good word these days, but she really fought for this and made sure that this was going to happen, because her belief is that this is how you get peace. And this is Peace Month. And I just applaud you, Lynette. You just did an amazing job. And it's wonderful to see what the District Peace Committee is doing under your leadership. Very, very, very good job. So thank you all for letting me be a part of this. I'm going to turn it over to Lynette now.
I don't know what to say. If y'all want to join the Peace Committee, we're accepting new members. We would love everyone in the entire district to be a member of the Peace Committee. I am thrilled that this worked out the way that it did. And I really do want to thank Anne and Joanne and all of the people and all of the panelists. You really were brave angels to do this, putting yourselves out there. And we could not have demonstrated this without you. And so I really appreciate from the bottom of my heart that you agreed to be on this panel. And I'm actually hoping that we can do this again and get even more people. I think that this is the way that we are going to heal what's going on in our country right now.
Okay. So thank you all very much. I'm going to go ahead, and Lynette, you can leave us, and thank you all who were here observing. All of your energy helped hold us and hold this space. We appreciate all of you too.
And I think that we had about 25 or so people who, like I said, are not Rotarians. And so maybe they got a little glimpse of Rotary, and they might decide that they want to become Rotarians after listening to all of this.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so.